Hey, hi, my name is Gregory Brandt. I'm a writer and I'm also a substitute teacher here in Hawaii. This school I worked at, one of the lowest performing schools in Hawaii and in the entire state. If you're not aware of it, there's Hawaii's public school system ranks one of the lowest in the United States. And after working at this particular elementary school this week, I saw teachers that were definitely not qualified to teach students. Some of them had never even been to college, obviously, and some of them would. One of them in particular, I'm thinking about. She would actually yell at the students, and her teaching skills were totally not what the kids needed. And I already was aware, Hawaii has one of the lowest ranked public school systems in the country, and also there's a huge disparity between public schools and private schools. It's something like 80% of all college students from Hawaii went to private schools. So what that means is that only 20% come from public schools. So basically, 80%, if you're in a public school in Hawaii, there's an 80% chance that you won't go to college, that you won't even go to college. And even if you do go to college, there's a high chance that you're not going to graduate. So, I was thinking about writing an essay about, the problems with the public school system in Hawaii. And in doing so, I found this great article written by Roderick McPhee, president of Punahou School, or he's obviously the former president. Now, Punahou School is one of the top ranked schools in the United States. It's the school that Barack Obama went to. He was actually born and raised in Hawaii, despite what Donald Trump says. And when he was born and raised in Hawaii, he went to the Punahou School. Like I said, it's one of the top ranked schools in the country, and it's really high performing. It's totally in contrast to the public school system in Hawaii, which, as I said, is one of the lowest ranked public school systems in the country. And there's just teacher shortage, and there's many teachers that are definitely not qualified, that don't have any education, and that don't know how to work with students as well. So we're going to go ahead and start this. This is Robert McPhee with the editorial. This book came out almost 20 years ago as well. It's called The Price of Freedom. The Price of Paradise. Hawaii's nickname is Paradise. And so I'm reading this now to see if any changes have been made, because obviously they've been dealing with this problem of a lack of qualified teachers for quite some time. I graduated from the University of Texas, and I also have a teaching degree. I'm more than qualified. However, after working in this particular school this week, I realized a lot of teachers, they're not qualified, and they're just working that job because of who they know. So let's get started. Are Hawaii's public schools before I get started, if you haven't already, hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button. Are Hawaii's public schools likely to improve? I initially declined an invitation to write this chapter, thinking some readers would be turned off by the thought of a private school president evaluating the job being done in the public schools. But two things caused me to change my mind. I have been a public school superintendent and know what public schools can be, and it has become increasingly clear that people inside Hawaii's public school system are reluctant to tell it like it is, because they have to work daily with elements that are part of the problem. I have the luxury of not having to worry about upsetting the legislature, teachers union, school board, or whatever. Running a well-funded private school is relatively easy. The people who run Hawaii's public schools face an almost impossible task because of social realities beyond their control. About 1/3 of Hawaii's preschool children are already headed for failure because of poverty, sickness, and other handicapping conditions, compelled with a lack of adult protection and nurturance. There are a lot of really bad parents in Hawaii. They really need to up the child abuse laws here, and also animal abuse. I've seen more of that in Hawaii than just about anywhere else. Private schools can dismiss students whose behavior disrupts the learning environment. Public schools don't have that option. They have to do the best with what they can, everyone who shows up at their doorsteps. There are, however, several areas in which improvement is necessary and could be achieved. Political leadership. George Orwell would undoubtedly have to have some incisive comments about concerning the doublespeak we receive from our elected officials about education. Governor Hawai'i, for example, has stated repeatedly that he wants public education in Hawaii second to none. But the only area I can find where Hawaii leads the nation is in the 47% of kindergarten children who are not ready to attend school when they arrive. It seems money is always tight when it comes time to actually provide more funds to the schools rather than just talk about providing them. Modern parenting. A major part of the problem is the way American parent brings up the American child. I offer this not as an excuse, but as a simple observation. I agree with the following comments as psychologist John Roseman, who appeared in the Honolulu Advertiser. In order to be educable, a child must pay attention in class, accept personal responsibility for assignments given to him by teachers, and be determined to hang in there when the academic gets going. Almost without exception, teachers tell me today that today's typical child does not pay attention, makes every attempt to avoid responsibility, and gives up at the first twinge of frustration. The connection between this and what is happening or not happening in the American family, sorry about that. The connection between this and what is happening or not happening in the American family is as clear as the grass is green. This generation of American parents acts as if it's more their responsibility to pay attention to their children than it is their children's responsibility to pay attention to them. This generation of American parents believes it is the utmost duty to shield their children from frustration and failure and rescue them if need be. Now, although this was written more than 20 years ago, it's even more evident today, where teachers are actually afraid to discipline children because the children are going to go home and tell their terrible parents, and then their parents are going to attack the children. Going to attack the teacher. As a substitute, I go by MR.G because I've had problems giving my full name, where the student will find me online and attack me online, or so I go by MR.G actually. A related problem is the pervasive influence of television on young people. I believe this is far worse than most people recognize, both in terms of the value children acquire during the incredible number of hours they watch, and in terms of what they are not doing, like reading and using their imaginations, while they sit as passive observers. Average viewing for elementary students is about 25 hours a week, and for high schoolers, 28 hours a week. This is approximately 6 times the hours spent doing homework. Okay, now even though kids today, they don't watch TV anymore, but they watch YouTube, but the numbers are the same. About 28 to 30 hours a week for high school students, and about 25 to 30 hours a week of watching YouTube for elementary school students. And a sixth of that time is spent doing homework. It could at least be 50-50. Think how much that would raise the graduation rate in this state. Teachers aren't appreciated. What really matters in our school are people, how well teachers teach and how well children learn. What problem is that best students in our school are not interested in going into teaching? This is not surprising since the incentives aren't there, and since they read, when they do read, about the problems facing our schools and about the blame attributed to teachers for the problems of young people. Who needs that? No revolution will ever occur in the schools unless it is focused primarily on what teachers do in the classroom with their students. Adding to my concerns about schooling in Hawaii is a statement made by 1992 by the president of Hawaii State Teachers Association that 80% of the math teachers in Hawaii are not certified to teach math. I saw this firsthand with somebody that, she thought that 12 goes into 50, 15, or she thought 15 goes into 50 5 times. Anyways. Anyways, whatever the question was, she was wrong. She obviously didn't know basic math. Unsatisfactory governance. Clearly, a governance of education in Hawaii is not satisfactory at present. The Department of Education is too centralized with many layers of bureaucracy that slow normal activities and stifle innovation, and the governor, legislator, and State Board of Education are all involved in the decision-making process. Too many decisions are decreed by administrators at the top rather than by teachers and principals in the field. No institution can prosper with a system like that. The question of who is in charge here is a real one. The Task Force on Educational Governance provided a litany of horror stories about our public schools. A teacher at Hauula Elementary School told us of using her own money to buy school supplies needed by her students. Another teacher described a special education class on the Big Island being taught in a converted boys' restroom, and a Farrington High School teacher reportedly serious problems in storing and disposing of hazardous chemicals at schools. That's where I was working, right by Farrington the other day, the elementary school that feeds into Farrington High School. Oh, actually, I don't want to mention. A lot of elementary schools work there. I could have mentioned worked in many schools. I'm not going to name the school that I worked at. But yeah, like I was saying, like there's issues, obviously. Okay, where was I? The Task Force on Educational Governance, okay. Unisons erect barriers. My own belief is that the rise of unions in public education is a major problem. What I would label the tyranny of collective bargaining makes it difficult, if not impossible, for the school reform effort to succeed. In 1961, the teachers of New York voted to unionize. In 1962, they won their first major collective bargaining agreement after a one-day strike. And in 1963, college board scores in the state began to decline. This may be a mere coincidence, but I am convinced that the trade union mindset that has dominated the teaching profession over the past 25 years is a major part of what has gone wrong in education. Along those same lines, I can reconcile on the concept of tenure with the concept of professionalism. Teachers can't have it both ways, and Hawaii provides an unfortunate example of why this is so. To my knowledge, very few teachers, no matter how incompetent, have been released in recent years. Most teachers in Hawaii are competent and dedicated, but there obviously are some who should not be in the classroom, like the one that I was describing. This seems, however, to be no effective mechanism to remove them. There seems to be, however, no effective mechanism to remove them. Union members sometimes put their personal finances ahead of their welfare of their students. For example, in a recent teachers' job action in Montgomery County, Maryland, NEA-affiliated teachers refused to write letters of recommendation for college-bound seniors unless those same students wrote letters to legislators encouraging them to increase teachers' salaries. Wow. In Hawaii, despite an acute shortage of teachers for special education, that's where I was trying to teach, the HSTA has opposed higher pay for these people, retreating to the litany of higher pay for all teachers. And the school that I was working at, they didn't have a special education teacher in either of the special education classes. That's when I came in to be the substitute teacher, but then the teacher's assistant, who had not nearly enough education to be the teacher, tried to step in and was like, oh, I'm the teacher because it's vacant, And she was like yelling at the kids to shut up. She's like, shut your mouth. She literally did that. Shut your mouth. She would yell at these little kids. And it just was so hurting because they're so small. What are you doing yelling at a little kid? A teacher should never yell at a little kid. School community-based management. Much is written about SSBM in Hawaii, but as long as our principals are unionized and the union must approve actions involving the principals, little change should be expected. A few schools are making progress on SCSBM, but there are exceptions. Nonprofit schools spend far less for results than government spend for failures. The cost per pupil in New York Archdiocese parish schools, 70% of whose students stay in school, stay off the streets, and graduate with high literacy and sellable skills, is about half that in New York City's failing public schools. So yeah, the only place where it's comparable to the Hawaii school system is in New York City, where basically you don't want to go to the public schools in New York City. There's a huge disparity between public and private schools in New York and in Hawaii. They're basically the same. Recent research has isolated several characteristics of private schools which may make them more effective than public schools. Some of these traits could be well emulated by public schools: an emphasis on values, high expectations for students, an orderly learning environment, clear sense of institutional direction, vigorous team spirit, and adroit instructional leadership. Such characteristics are possible only when responsibility and authority are placed in the local school level. Lump sum budgeting on a per pupil basis to each of our schools, with decisions about how to allocate these funds made by the people in each school, would ease the way for this kind of growth. Another suggestion is to modify the method of selecting members of the school board so that the majority of them are appointed by the governor, with some elected by the people. This might increase accountability and could be a step in the right direction. Clearly, school repairs must be removed from the Department of Accounting and General Services and put closer to the schools. Our present system is inefficient, ineffective, and indefensible. Some way must be found to reduce the bureaucracy and influence of the DOE teachers' actions in the classroom. A way of bringing important decisions down the level of the school must be found, and teachers must be involved in the process or it is doomed to fail. There should be much more choice in the public sector. Competition in the sector would be advantageous to all concerned. Within the public schools, parents should be free to choose where their children attend. Misplaced priorities. In a state where teachers need to use their own money to buy school supplies, a bookkeeping error meant an extra $32 million for a sports arena at the University of Hawaii, off of one bookkeeping error. The renovation of the state capitol should be further evidence to the public school teachers of Hawaii that their importance to the state is not impressive to those who control state finances. Are our public schools likely to improve? I would like to be hopeful, but I don't see too many signs pointing in the right direction. Hawaii's teachers and administration face many obstacles, and our political leadership doesn't appear to be giving them much hope. So, that was an editorial written by the president of Punahou Schools all the way back about 20 years ago. And not much has changed and not much has improved. He makes an emphasis on how there's not enough qualified teachers, and the teachers that aren't qualified, that shouldn't be there, they are, it's hard to get rid of them because of like the way the culture is in Hawaii. It's like who you know. So once again, if you haven't already, hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button. Thank you for listening, and aloha.